Last night, it appears the class war officially began, and we can say that the class war has been on for the past few decades. Probably we can go back to the air traffic controllers conflict that went on with Reagan and say that's when it began. It officially began last night when Scott Walker decided to use what he called what the Republicans called a nuclear option and ran through the legislation. But I take it that March 10 is the day that we can finally begin to turn the tide, and it can be the day that workers, especially firefighters, teachers, police officers, especially people who are public employees in government, can begin to wield their power to show their strength, to show what labor is actually capable of doing in a society, because typically the workers, when they have the power to make a society question the way that it is structured, to go up against immoral leaders who are forcing people to undergo stress and duress and experience injustice, to change those policies because they are unjust. In Indiana, you have Governor Mitch Daniels, who is doing his own sort of anti-union busting. He's wants to make it illegal for people to attempt to organize unions, so I understand. In Michigan, we've got the possibility of a city being taken over by a corporation. We've got the possibility of assets in the Wisconsin state being sold off. The people of this country, every single person, should be considering a general strike. You may not be in Wisconsin, you may not be at ground zero for this class war right now, but ground zero will come to you if you do not take action. There's some way you are going to be caught up in this web. It's unimaginable that we could go another decade without the majority of the poor, working class, middle class, and even the lower upper class, if there's such a caste, getting swept up in this agenda that is being pushed by the top 1%, by the corporations, by those who committed an inside job on the economy in 2008. The general strike may not seem practical to you. It may not seem like something you normally would consider to just stop working and go out and protest and occupy, and you may be wondering, what's our demands? What do we exactly expect to get out of a general strike? That's the first problem, is there can't be any second guessing. There wasn't any second guessing here in Wisconsin, as I've considered. The reality is that the unions understood what they had to do. They had to strike. They had to send a message to Scott Walker that they weren't going to take this. And then they proceeded to take action and to occupy the Capitol and to hold a position that could create an opening. Created an opening for those 14 Democratic state senators to leave the state. Because if the people had not been out in the streets, there wouldn't have been any reinforcement for the notion that state senators should flee a state. Goes for Indiana as well. Those state senators can't be counted on. They're asking people to make changes at the ballot box. Elections aren't why there is any prospect of taking down people like Scott Walker and their fatal privatization, free market, class war agenda. What needs to be done is people need to be out in the streets. They need to be at the Capitol. They need to be refusing to leave. They need to be creating a situation where power defers to the people, because that's democracy. It's not mob rule, it's democracy, that citizens set the way forward. And so a general strike should be what people do. Finally, if you haven't protested before, this is your opportunity. This is your opportunity to get out there, and it doesn't have to be political. It can just be the fact that you recognize that your very survival is at stake. That's when the most powerful resistance begins. It's when you realize that your job as a teacher is under threat because you recognize that somebody in government has decided that you are the burden. Same goes for a police officer. If you're a unionized police officer, if you're part of a union and your government is trying to break you apart. Same goes for firefighters. Firefighters who want health care. We have workers who are being told that they don't have a right to their pensions, what they retire with. We have people saying that what you retire with is far too much money because in the private sector they do not have these luxuries as they've been cast. The whole model, the whole narrative should be shifted. This isn't about what private workers don't have. It should be what private workers should get to have, what public employees have, what those who are fighting in Wisconsin have enjoyed and are willing to give up so that the economy can get back on track, unlike those on Wall Street who have no allegiance to this country whatsoever. Their allegiance is to the almighty dollar. They have no allegiance to this society. They do not care about the rights or privileges. They do not care about democracy. They do not care about the soil that they eat, sleep, piss, and shit on. They only care about the dollar that they make that affords them the ability to live in a rich world, in a rich white man's world, and affords them the ability to call any escorts they might want to enjoy whatever rich sexual fantasy they can possibly have, to engage in partying and just bourgeoisie magnificence the world over. And so for us, we have to look this in the eye and say this is disgusting, it's obscene, and we're going to take this on and we're going to say that there are people who deserve to retire comfortably because they have worked for decades. These firefighters, these police officers, these teachers, they don't just work for like 5-7 years and then quit and then sit around and live off the money. They are people who have put their life into their professions, and they deserve to have this. This is part of social democracy, which is something that has become a thing of the past, it seems. The narrative has been pushed by Tea Party elements and by others, and there hasn't been enough of a Democratic Party liberal pushback, and we have to protect social democracy, and in this time of crisis, we have to even advance social democracy because it is the way out of the crisis. The crisis improves because we go up against the state and the corporations that are making the state wage this class war. And we tell them that we not only want the rights to be preserved for workers, we don't only want rights and privileges that in this country we have typically enjoyed, but we also want much more because you've been taking. And now that you've overreached, now that you've gone too far, we are going to take it. We're going to take this country back. We are going to put people in handcuffs who have been criminals. We are going to move out the people who have wrecked this country. We're going to move in people who can put this country on the right course. We're going to fundamentally change the way that politics are done in this country. And we are going to make being out in the street, protesting, participation, resistance, a fundamental part of the way that we get this country back on track. Because that's the way forward. And so, to Wisconsin, a general strike should be considered. I'm not there, but I'm in solidarity. Good luck.